The first time the glass broke, no one was near it. It was late and quiet in the Carter house. The TV was low, the baby monitor muted. Emma Carter walked into the kitchen to get water and found the living room full of scattered shards, from the front door's window, shattered from the inside out. No one had kicked it, no stone lay on the porch. The broken glass lay in a neat fan, like someone had pressed a hand to the pane and opened it. On the hall table there was a small footprint. Not a shoe mark, not a bare foot. A print shaped like a child's hand, small and flat, with something like a toy imprint in the center. Emma didn't know why, but she felt watched. She reached for her phone and took a picture. The timestamp read 2:02 a.m. In the background, from the baby monitor, came the faint sound of a lullaby, one Emma did not remember ever hearing. 2 months earlier the Carters had adopted. They were a normal family in a normal town, Prescott, Ohio, where the cornfields meet the highway and people leave keys in cars more often than not. Mark Carter was a mechanic, careful and practical. Emma taught second grade at the elementary school and loved quiet routines. Their daughter Lucy was 7 and messy in the way kids are messy, full of scraped knees and stories. The adoption came from a county agency late one evening, a special needs placement that needed a stable home. The file said the child was small, quiet, and had been moved around. The boy's name on the form read, Eli Harper. Photo, a thin child with big eyes and a tight smile. The caseworker said it would be temporary at first, a foster trial, she called it. They said Eli had special gifts, but brushed the explanation away. Emma and Mark agreed. What family doesn't want to help a child? Eli arrived with 2 worn suitcases and a thin blanket. He walked into their house polite and meek, carrying his shoes in his hands like someone who had learned to keep things clean in strange places. He looked at Lucy with no jealousy, only quiet curiosity. The first week was easy. Eli did not cry at night. He learned where the cereal was. He smiled for Lucy's silly songs and made a bed out of old pillows in the spare room. On the paperwork there was a small note from a prior foster. He's very aware. Watch how he listens. Emma thought it meant Eli paid attention. She didn't yet understand how that listening worked. Small things shifted first. The family cat, Milo, stopped sleeping on the couch and moved to Eli's doorway. The cat's purring changed when Eli was nearby. It slowed as if something was holding the sound. One morning, Mark found the radio tuned to a station that his daughter never liked, playing a slow classical piece Eli hummed under his breath. The thermostat reset itself to Eli's favorite temperature. The house seemed to bend around him, small decisions happening as if someone else had spoken them out loud. Emma called it settling in. Mark called it kids being kids. But Lucy stopped inviting friends over. She said in a small voice, Eli always knows when someone lies. Emma laughed and squeezed her hand. She did not laugh for long. School was a test. Emma kept Eli's adoption quiet for the first week, hoping he would fit in. But some teachers noticed odd things. At recess, a bully fell and cried, and Eli stood very still, looking at the boy with a calm, almost hungry focus. The child stopped crying and sat quietly, wiping hands on pants. The bully later refused to explain why he felt strange. A guidance counselor called Emma and asked for a meeting. Eli senses things, the counselor said, choosing words like she tasted them. He knows things no child should. Emma agreed to keep watching. She told herself patience would fix it. The lullabies began at night. At first they were soft creaks in the hall, easy to blame on old pipes. Emma woke and walked the house but found nothing. Then Lucy learned to point them out. He sings when the moon is full, she said with the certainty of a child reading a fact. Emma checked the calendar. A full moon was due in 3 days. On the night of the moon, the lullaby woke her again. It came from Eli's room as if someone else had pressed a record there, a warped, slow tune with words no one knew. She tiptoed to Eli's doorway but saw only his small shadow on the wall. He was sitting on the floor with his back to the door, hands folded like a small director. The lullaby stopped when Emma stood there. Eli looked at her and smiled, and Emma felt something like an apology and an order all at once. Eli's eyes were dark and still. They watched without blinking, collecting things from the room like a metal detector sweeps a field. Mark said it was a child's focus. A neighbor, Mrs. Haynes, said it was the old kind of look you see in photographs from 100 years ago. He'll be fine, she told Emma, but she watched Eli with a hand at her throat. Once, while doing the dishes, Emma found the family photographs facing the wall. Eli sat at the kitchen table, head cocked. They are restless, he said as if naming weather. Emma asked, who is restless? He pointed to an old picture of Mark's father, a man who had died years ago. The candle on the mantel flickered though no draft moved. The atmosphere felt cold. Neighbors began whispering. Someone left a banana at Eli's doorstep with a note, "Not a toy." A church member stopped by with a small blessed medal and stayed for only a minute. The local school put up a sign about being aware of unusual behavior and asked families to report anything odd. It made the Carters nervous but also angry. They were trying to love a child. They wanted their home to be a refuge. But Eli changed the shape of refuge until it fit him. Mark began working late more often, claiming overtime. Emma found she was praying quietly in places she never had before. It felt like the walls themselves asked for it. One afternoon, Lucy did not come home from school. The police arrived while Emma sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. Panic swallowed her voice. Neighbors searched. Mark drove Lucy's favorite route. An hour passed. On the third hour, a small footprint was found pressed into the mud near the creek, 3 toes pressed, and between them a tiny handprint the same shape she had photographed the night the glass broke. The footprint led back toward the Carter house and stopped at the backyard gate. No sign of Lucy past that. Emma felt something in her chest cracking. She ran inside calling Lucy's name. Eli stood by the window, hands folded, watching. He did not look at Emma. That night, sirens cut through Prescott. The town woke and watched the Carters' porch light burn. Search teams combed the fields. Cameras on nearby highways replayed an odd moment. Lucy's bike crossed the frame, the rider a blur, then nothing. A neighbor's security camera caught the backyard gate opening as if pushed by a wind that didn't exist. The footage showed a small shadow cross the yard, leading toward the nearby woods. Then a sound, barely audible, a child's voice humming the lullaby. The clip stopped there. The police questioned Eli. He answered softly. She followed the music. Emma felt the world tilt. She fell to her knees in the kitchen. Eli knelt beside her, placing his hand on her shoulder. It was cool as river stone. The last frame of the night showed the Carters' front window. The shattered glass had been swept clean. Someone had placed Lucy's red ribbon, the one she wore in her hair, on the sill. The ribbon lay like an offering. Emma cupped the ribbon in her hands, and for a moment she believed she could still hear the lullaby threading through the house, soft as a promise and sharp as a command. They brought in files and people who did not believe in ghosts. The county placed the case under special review. Detectives, a child psychologist, and a social worker sat in the Carter living room and watched video after video. The footage showed Lucy riding her bike past the creek, then a shadow moving at the tree line, then nothing. The psychologist, Dr. Nolan, leaned forward and asked Eli simple questions about games and school. Eli answered slowly with polite clarity. When Dr. Nolan asked where Lucy had gone, Eli looked at the window and said, "She went where the music lives." The room went quiet. No expert could say what that meant. The police trooper who had seen 100 calls nodded once, as if someone had just flipped a page in a book he could not finish reading. Files from the adoption agency were thin but odd. The boy had been at several homes, they said, but some records had been redacted. One file listed a small hospital in a neighboring state and a doctor's name that no one could trace. An old nurse's note slipped through said, "Child reacts to sound, soothed by low hums." A former foster parent wrote, "He listened like him listening was loud." When detectives dug, people remembered Eli as polite and quiet, but some admitted a sense of wrongness hours after he left. Pets shunning them, pipes tapping at midnight, clocks stalling. The more they asked, the more answers blurred. It felt like the facts were a house of paper, and every time someone touched a corner, the paper folded into something new. That night, Dr. Nolan played a recording of the lullaby for the team. It was warped, a loop of small notes beneath a low hum. When they slowed it down, the sound folded into a pattern. Not a song but a spoken cadence, like a language with blanks for human names. The linguist they called and frowned. "It's not a human tongue," she said. "It carries structure but the vowels are wrong." The audio analyst found a faint overlay, a high-frequency signature common in antique music boxes and in some old factory machines. The file was traced to a small maker of toys that had closed decades before. A line in the ledger read, "Special orders, private. No returns." The toy maker's address was an old house on the edge of Redfield, a town people now said avoided. They drove to Redfield at dawn. The house was small and sagged like a tired man. The door opened with a moan. Inside were boxes of carved wood, half-finished puppets, and blueprints so precise they looked like blue veins on paper. A journal lay on a bench, its pages faded but intact. The handwriting was tight and angry. The writer called himself an artisan and wrote of making helpers, to ease grief and to teach obedience. He wrote of a ritual, a low hum, a circle of carved teeth, and a child who could hear the machine's breath. The last entry read, "If this breaks the line, burn the models." The house smelled like varnish and old rain. On a shelf, under a cloth, they found a puppet small as a fist with glass eyes like black seeds. The sheriff felt suddenly cold and set the puppet back with a hand that did not shake. Back in Prescott, strange things increased. The garden gate opened at night and closed again with no wind. Neon lights stuttered over the diner. A neighbor reported that their grandfather's old clock had run in reverse for 3 minutes straight. The town animal shelter logged dozens of animals refusing to eat near Eli's former street. Rumors turned to fear when 2 more children reported hearing lullabies on their way home. Parents walked the sidewalks with flashlights and whistles. A meeting at the school turned into a shouting match. Some wanted Eli removed at once. Others argued no child deserved that. Emma and Mark sat apart in their kitchen, the house hollow and raw, the ribbon in a plastic bag on the counter like a small, stubborn proof. Eli's past kept leaking in odd ways. A woman in a nursing home remembered a boy visiting a room late at night and humming a tune that made an old woman sit up and weep for a man named Arthur. A mail carrier recalled a package addressed to no one with a toy blueprint inside. A retired factory worker showed photos of a toy that matched the tiny puppet the team found in Redfield. The pattern grew. Wherever a puppet like that appeared, local grief changed shape. People who had grieved hard stopped crying. Those who were anxious felt steadied. It was not kindness, it was trimming. The psychology team began to use a harsher word: attenuation. Eli did not soothe. He reduced. Detectives found a small tape in Eli's case file, mislabeled and nearly destroyed. They cleaned it and played it in the conference room. A low, mechanical voice at the edge of the track chanted numbers and then a phrase, "Strings bind where grief has breath." It repeated in a loop and then dropped into silence. The social worker pushed back tears. "This is a machine," she said. "It uses a child." The sheriff rubbed his temple and asked whether this was a crime or a grief problem. No one had a tidy box for it. The town had to act as a town. They called for a blessing at the church and for experts at the university. They asked people to leave doors unlocked and to watch each other's children. They prayed and they watched. The lullaby threaded the nights like a thin cord no one could cut. Emma started keeping a journal, small entries that read like a rope thrown into darkness. She wrote of eyes that held too much, of the way Eli looked at a rain puddle and knew the shape of storms. She wrote of the sharp feel of being touched and not moved, like a plant learning a new bend. She wrote the truth she could not say aloud, that Eli felt older than 7, older than Lucy, older than Towns. She wrote that when she woke to the lullaby, she sometimes felt a hand on her shoulder that was cooler than air. Mark read the pages when she slept and felt the world tilt, not from fear only but from the slow pull of a thing rearranging their life. They planned to find Lucy to take back the night. A group from the town walked the creek with flashlights and radios. At the water's edge they found marks in the mud, small, 3-toed prints and the outline of a tiny hand. The prints led to the old willow where branches tangled like hair and stopped at a hole half hidden beneath roots. They peered in and found a space lined with toys, not Lucy but toys, small carved things, faces blank and smiling. Among the toys sat a small, stained ribbon. The ribbon was Lucy's. From below, a slow hum rose, like a machine warming. The sheriff tried to shine a light deeper, but the beam bent oddly and left a circle of darkness in the center. The hair on the back of everyone's neck stood up. A voice that sounded like Eli, only thinner and not a child, whispered, "She listens now." They returned to the Carter house and barricaded the doors. The town drew lines at their threshold like salt, but nothing of salt could hold what the house had learned. That night the wind was still. The TVs showed the same static. A car drove slowly past their porch, then drove away. At 2:02 a.m., the hour the first glass broke, all the clocks in the Carter house ticked at once and then stopped. From Eli's room came the small lullaby, clear and cold as blue glass. Emma lifted the curtain and saw Lucy at the window, though the yard was empty. Lucy's face was pale as old paper and her eyes hollowed, her mouth moving in the same rhythm of the song. Then Lucy turned, and instead of seeing a child behind her, Emma saw rows of small faces, puppets, watching from the dark. They smiled. They moved their mouths like marionettes. Eli stood in the doorway behind them, older in the way a moon makes a night different. He spoke in a voice that held many echoes. "We were waiting to teach you. Now we will begin." The lullaby swelled, and somewhere in the town a porch swing moved like a hand closing.